Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. My dad was the single greatest man I ever met. He used to tell me, Glenn, I'm not going to tell you how to be a man. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to let you watch me, and you're welcome. That always struck me very deeply. My dad never intended to try and make my path easy or smooth or devoid of any hurdles. He understood that very strain and struggle was part of the journey that's going to make every one of us into the person that we're intended to be. I would encourage everybody to think when they're leading people that our job is to prepare the child for the path and not the path for the child. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OneQLeadership.
Our guest today is Ron Stolski. Coach Stolski is the head coach at Brainerd High School in Minnesota. Greetings, Coach. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Ty.
Now, Coach, you've been coaching in the game for 58 years, right?
That is correct.
45 years there as head coach at Brainerd. And you were telling me a story about your first head coaching job. Tell me that again.
Well, it was 1962. I was fresh out of college. My wife and I had just had our second daughter. I had a halfway decent college career, so I was a decent player. I had some opportunities to be an assistant, but I wanted to be a head coach. So I lived in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, beautiful state, and got an opportunity to apply for the head coaching job in a little community in our northwestern Minnesota, Kensington, Minnesota, the home of the Kensington runestone, which supposedly proved that the Vikings were here long before Christopher Columbus. In any event. So I go and apply for that job. Now, it's a beautiful story in itself, and we don't have the time for that when I met the superintendent and so on. But the upshot was this. They had a field that they had never measured. They had no goalposts and no scoreboard because they hadn't scored in 5 years. It was 8-man football, which I had never seen. And, of course, the interview occurred in early June, and one thing led to another, and I accepted that position. And my brother and I came up and built goalposts. And for our first practice, we thought we were going to have 2 days. You know, the assistant coach was a woodworking teacher. There were 13 teachers in the school, 21 in the senior class, 21 people. So I'm thinking I'm going to have 2 days, right? Well, morning practice at 8 a.m., 3 kids show up.
Oh, wow.
3
kids.
And we ended up with 13. But for our first game, only 11 came because 2 got a job mowing for a local farmer. We lost our first 4 games. I was there 2 years. We never lost another game.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting. You had to build the goalpost.
Well, and the great part is, so we lost our first 4 games fairly close. We actually had some players. Our 5th game was homecoming, and lo and behold, if we don't win big, like big. So I'm out there with the superintendent, jumping on, in the middle of the field, and pretty soon I hear the sound of a 57 Chevy, right? It's some of the local farm boys had put ropes on the goalposts that we had built, and there was a black and white TV in those days, right? And revved her up and just tore them down.
Tore down the ones you built.
And the superintendent says, "Don't you worry, we'll get them up in the morning." And
hilarious.
Vern Johnson, who owned the bowling alley, 4 alleys, but he had a little lunch counter with 6 stools. Vern went crazy and he said, "Hamburgers for everybody." In our town,
everybody
our players
happy.
of 13 kids in the entire town of Kensington marched down the 2-block Main Street and had hamburgers at Vern Johnson bowling.
That's hilarious. But the reason I have you on, Coach, a few years ago when I did an old podcast for the AFCA called 2-Minute Warning, I had you on and you explained to me what it means to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as long as I've been doing podcasts, on that podcast and on this one, I always close with that statement because of how important it is.
Thank you.
And I wanted to have you on to kind of give us your thought on how did you come to that being what the role of a leader is and what that actually means for people listening.
I discovered that. I was an athletic director as well, and I discovered that by chance. It was fairly early in my athletic director career, and I had a coach come in who was concerned prior to his season, who was concerned that they weren't going to be very good in this particular sport and they weren't going to win many games. And I said, how do you know this? Your season ends Saturday and so forth. But anyway, he came back a week later, said the same thing, and I looked at him and I said, listen, your job is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And he got up, and I thought, that sounded pretty good. So I jotted it down, and it has been a mantra of mine ever since. And that job entails lots of things. And first, I think it entails developing a trust, not only with players, but with their parents and with the community that you're in. And I've always believed that players become your disciples. And if you're doing the right thing as a coach, in terms of teaching them beyond fundamentals, you're teaching them care and compassion. You're teaching them giving back. Whatever your record happens to be, that, and we're lucky we've been in Brainerd now for 45 years, so I'm coaching grandchildren, literally. Our mantra happens to be the warrior way. This is how we do what we do. So I believe that you need to enunciate your philosophy, not just yours, the one that you put together with your coaches and your players.
I think that's great, Coach. As I talk about it and have developed my leadership philosophy, it's based on two things. The role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And if you are an effective leader, then those you lead will go on to become effective leaders themselves.
They will, and leaders know where they're going. They know how to take people with them. Exactly. I've got 7 principles of leadership. There's books written everywhere. You're doing podcasts. And I just came up with these, and I think part of it is watching other leaders work. Okay. I was fortunate to work for a tremendous superintendent of schools. And one thing I noticed in particular, pay attention to detail, pour the water, turn the lights on in the morning and turn them off at night, and show compassion and care. And as importantly, professionals never cease learning.
Mm-hmm. That's important.
And here I'm at my age now. Yeah. I'm a note taker like you can't believe. Yeah. I think the other part is leaders do know when to stand their ground. That's part of my 7th of the.
Know when to stand your ground.
Yeah.
I watching. So I got into the AFCA back in 2003 as a graduate assistant, and I was in love with the game of football. But as I've developed and throughout my time through when I left in 2017, I realized that what I really loved about the game is the organizational leadership and the leadership of the game, right? Mm-hmm. Playing for Coach Saban, Coach D'Antonio, Coach Williams, watching Bill Belichick and watching you and watching all these coaches, what I learned that good leaders do is they explain the expectations that they have for the people who are in their organization, and then they also explain the evaluation method on how they will evaluate those expectations. So there's no question on what we want you to do here and how we want you to do
it. And that can often be a challenge in terms of those around you, your staff. You must be sharing. You must be sharing. If you don't believe it, you can't sell it. And you must be sharing the goals and philosophies that you have within your program or just your personal life itself. And I think one trait that I really, really appreciate in leaders, it might sound different, and that is compassion. Oh, yeah. I think a good leader is strong, demanding, has expectations, has follow-through, but there's a care and a compassion among the great ones. Not for the game itself. I mean, one of the things you said, and maybe you didn't mean it this way, but here I caught it because I appreciate you very much. We got to know you somewhat through the AFC, and I always thought that is a classy guy.
I appreciate that.
And a lot of times, a person's care shows through that. I said, Tai knows what he's doing, but he's not overt about it. He's not, look at me. It's just that he cares so much that here he is, he's at this meeting, he's fulfilling this duty.
I appreciate that. Is that how you would define compassion? Tell me how you would define that in terms of leadership.
Yes, caring enough about your profession, A, to get better at it, B, to speak highly of it, C, to model it, and D, to teach it.
That's important.
Yeah, our kids, our teams learn caring about one another. You know, the single most thing, and I don't even know if it's a change, but in the last 10 or 12 years, our team always have an exit form for them. That's not an exit interview, but it's a form where they'll pick each individual player. They'll pick the captains for next year. They'll vote on MVP. They'll do this and that. And then prior to the season, I have them do 5 goals that they want to get out of the season, okay? And then I ask them for 5 team goals, okay? You know, the number one goal is over the last, I don't know how many years.
What has it been?
Become a family.
Oh, really?
That is the number one goal.
Wow. And
the second, and it's the same thing, is be a brotherhood. It's not always win the conference title. It is sometimes. And then what we do with those 5 team goals is we make a big placard, put them up in the locker room, and every Monday after our weekend game, we review the goals. Right. How are we doing on becoming a family? Because it's not always easy to be a family. Do we care for one another? Are we taking care? So that's the interesting thing that's happening.
Well, as I've thought about this philosophy, create and maintain, I looked at leaders and I see that constant evaluation is something that good leaders do, and that's what you're talking about there. We have set the goals, but we're constantly evaluating those goals. Yeah. Talk about that maybe as a head coach, running a school for as long as you've been there, probably grown it and all that kind of thing, the evaluation of yourself, the introspection and those kind of things.
Well, I think I said earlier in the interview, professionals never stop learning.
Yeah, exactly.
So you do, even with my years of experience and so on, beyond evaluating our staff, which I do. I mean, that's an ongoing thing, right? I mean, that's ongoing. I also evaluate myself.
Yeah,
and one of my key things is this. By the way, I'm also the exec director of football in Minnesota. Right. Yeah. Are we who we say we are? We say we're the keepers of the game. Are we who we say we are? And so let's evaluate that. Do we in fact believe in enhancing the game? What do we do to recognize our history, or that sort of thing? So evaluation is constant. It might occur at the end of a season, but I think, am I who I say I am? Are we who we say we are?
It's a very important concept, right?
Yeah.
I'll ask a couple more questions before we wrap. One of them, earlier you mentioned that a leader knows when to stand their ground. Tell me about that.
Well, you either manage change or it manages you, right? And the one constant we do know is change. But there are times when in the face of whatever it may be, that in my view, a leader has to be able to say no, or has to be able to say, well, we've looked this through, whatever it happens to be, and no, we're not going to take that path. You need to be able to stand your ground on occasion. You also, obviously, you need to be open to all ideas, but stand your ground.
Right. And then the last question, Coach, as the executive director of the Minnesota Football Coaches Association, talk to me about the state of the game and where you see it going on a grand scale across
Well, here's
the nation.
what I see.
Yeah.
I see the pendulum swinging back from the uproar about the safety and particularly the concussion issue. I honestly see it coming back. And I see it coming back for this reason. The research is, the research continues to come out in support of the game of football, that the values of playing football far exceed the risks. That's one in research, and we're getting more research orientated, and the thing we need to do is let the public know this. But the other thing that's happened, obviously, is the way we practice. The amount of practice contact time we have. And sometimes I think it might be even an overreach. Maybe we're not doing enough of it. The other thing, of course, is we all have the concussion protocol. So and you know, the practice methods, the amount of time, and so on. And that's universal. I mean, that's through youth football, high school football, college, and the pros. I think football has probably never been more popular than it is today. I do think I don't want to use the term battle, but I think there's enough passionate leadership at every level that says we're not going to let this game get away. But we do realize that we have to speak to the values of the game beyond the concerns we have, because the game has never been safer, and you know that. It's never been safer.
Coach Stolski, this has been an excellent conversation. I've always wanted to revisit that saying, that
Well,
role of a leader with you, and kind of pick it apart a little bit.
I hope we did it well enough, because it's a constant mantra.
Right. Well, I appreciate you joining me here on the One Question podcast.
Thank you, and it's so great to see you.
That was Coach Ron Stolski. He is the head coach at Brainerd High School, and he's also the executive director of the Minnesota Football Coaches Association. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.
This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.